So there's people coming in, which is good. So welcome if you're just arriving. My name is Paul Saunders. I'm your facilitator for today's session. So just going to give a chance to come in. So hope you're enjoying the cool, the sunny weather in Ballarat this morning. So glad it's not raining. That's always a good sign. It's good. So I'm based in Melbourne and it's a beautiful sunny morning here, which is good. So yeah, looking forward to opportunity to talk you through how to have positive resilience during this interesting time we're having in our lives through COVID-19. So I'm just going to give people a few more opportunities to come in and connect up as we come through. Feel free if you want to use the chat, if you want to sort of say hello or use the Q&A. Need to, in the sense of asking questions. Leah from the Commerce Ballarat group will be here also to sort of check in as well and sort of help out if there are any questions there. So we'll regularly check in as well. So might get started if that's all right with everybody here. So welcome. As I said before, my name is Paul Saunders. I'm a psychologist with the Positive Institute, and I've worked with corporations and businesses, small businesses, family businesses, franchises for about 20 years now. And I've mainly worked from the people side of their business, leadership, change management, and overall psychological services as well. And I certainly have found this last few months have been an interesting, challenging time for a number of my clients, and I imagine for yourself in the business world. And spending a lot of time working with business owners, family owners, and business leaders, purely just around their own strategies about managing themselves and also how they're working with their teams and their families in this difficult time. So the positive thing about it is that there are very effective ways to help yourself manage and cope with the change that's going on. But at the same time, think with the teams as well and your businesses. So hopefully you'll find this morning's session informative and give you a few practical tips. And as you'll see, my type of psychology is fairly pragmatic in the sense of just wanting to offer you some options to consider and some ways of actually looking at solutions or ideas for yourself to take on board and take away out of today. So thinking forward as we go forward, just keep in mind if you know, at the moment your microphones would most likely be mute, but that way keep a chance to listen to each other. Feel free to make any comments in the chat room and then a Q&A, and Leah and myself will always check in regularly about those. And we'll also take you through a couple of polls just to get a bit of feedback from yourself about certain situations. What we're going to cover today is certainly some of the ways of staying resilient for the long haul. As you know, this is something that's not going to go away straight away. And so something we've got to consider in the sense of what's our best strategies to cope with a longer term sort of change rather than just a short term one. Plan and make decisions, look at the ways you're leading your team through this change and how to stay mentally agile and adaptive to the changes ahead. I want to quickly get you to check and have a look at this picture. What do you notice about the person at the front here? What you're probably noticing is that he's looking very much straight ahead. And this is exactly what happens to us psychologically in a crisis. We go into what's called tunnel vision. We debond and disconnect with other people around us, and we focus on our own basic needs and our own focus. How does this work in the sense of what's been noticing at all in the COVID-19? Is, you know, the issues we've had with people racing around, you know, fighting over each other for toilet paper. And toilet paper issues were a myth. In actual fact, toilet paper is actually made here in Victoria. We have never had a problem with it as being a crisis. But as you see, our psychology of our thinking completely changes. It doesn't necessarily stay rational. And so we go into emotional states of survival. And so this sort of focus is purely on ourselves and we disconnect to our social norms. Partly because what you're seeing is a catastrophe thinking. And what happens is our mind goes into this complete sort of, you know, oh my God, this is the end of the world sort of activities. And we really get into this. And the reason I'm showing you this is because this is normal. This is what happens when people go through a crisis. I've done it. I know in my business, I certainly, you know, when I first had impacted, a lot of my work at the beginning of this year and for the last few years has mainly been in leadership development. I'm an associate with Melbourne Business School, been running training sessions, organising as a consultant and coach. All those things stopped. And so I needed to reassess and change my business model. And fortunately, as a psychologist, I was able to convert back to traditional counselling work and offering one-on-one individual support. And the last few months, I've been spending a lot of time like this in webinars and workshops virtually with organisations, individually and with groups, helping them cope, look at sort of resilience strategies and wellbeing strategies, as well as doing a lot of one-on-one individual work. And also have converted my business to do more e-learning activities. So I had to step out of that, and as I'll take you through these sessions this morning, how to move away from this catastrophe type thinking, which happens to all of us, but there are ways to actually move from it. Because what happens is in that type of catastrophe thinking is you get into these ants running through your head. There's automatic negative thoughts, and it's quite common this happens. And if this has happened to you, it's quite natural to accept them. What you've got to then think about is how do you come out of these and how do you work through those? And as a real challenging situation. I know I certainly had a retailer who in April contacted me. I'd been working with him in the past, and he's, you know, was very much a catastrophe thinking, automatic thoughts to the point he couldn't switch off. He couldn't actually work out how to clear it. He couldn't sleep. He kept waking up, always in this worry of negative thoughts of what was going wrong. And so main thing I needed to do was just help him learn how to switch off. What are some techniques to actually help him actually reset his thinking and look at different perspectives? So it's just some teaching, coaching and training sessions that I did with him one-on-one to help him stay out of this state of mind. It's not to say you won't go back into it, but it's learning that hopefully out of today, what are some techniques to move forward and manage yourself when you're in these situations? Because from a neuroscience perspective, what you're seeing is that it's, you know, where our prefrontal cortex mainly operates our logic and our thinking, it's our limbic system and our amygdala that's probably running a fair bit at the moment for you. And there's a fair bit of that's just purely our basic human needs of survival and safety are important for us. And that's what we focus on. And that emotion, as you see at the back part of our brain, then stays with us. And that's why it affects your sleep, your thinking and clarity. And you need to learn techniques, if you haven't already, how to actually manage this so you can cope and be an effective business leader still and operate your business in a rational way rather than an emotional way. The challenge is that you've probably been going through a fair bit of juggling and resetting. You've probably been working through a whole lot of different things, the way your home life is, kids being at home for school, resetting home and work time, balancing out as a family, and then also not only being able to contact a lot of your family. I know I've got a daughter in New York, and I'm regularly catching up with her and just seeing how she's coping and working through all the challenges there. And, you know, both my other two children live in Melbourne, but, you know, I've only been able to see them by sort of Zoom and Netflix party sessions and activities. So, and again, that's been a learning experience for me to sort of just adjust and learn how much I can connect with people purely virtually. So here's an opportunity to have a think about, first of all, you know, everybody's different in how we actually adapt to change and manage change. So I'm going to take an opportunity here to look at a bit of a poll. So I'm just going to open up a poll here. Just want you to answer these two questions and see in the sense of that, we'll get a bit of feedback. Purely anonymous. Just answer these two questions. I am able to adapt to change, and there's your choices there, and I tend to bounce back after hardship or illness. So we've got about 80% of people have done the poll. So what we'll do is we'll sort of end it there. I'll share the results. As you see here, and this is great, thank you for your feedback here. I'm able to adapt to change. As I said, you know, 25% say moderately, good percentage of you saying yes, you can, which is great to sort of see, and very strong, which is good. So the good thing is and hopefully as you're already experiencing for the last few months, you can change and you can adapt. And it's having that attitude that I can continually adapt and change. And it's just sort of seeing there in the sense of the ability to bounce back, you know, some of you moderately, some of you a little. There's a good percentage also that they strongly agree. And as you can see, people are different. There's no right or wrong. It's just being aware for yourself. What's my ability to change? What are my coping strategies? How can I bounce back? And some of the things to think about as we go through this is some of these strategies you'll already probably be doing, which is great. Hopefully confirm. Some of the techniques should be new and you think, yep, I could try that. And that's hopefully one of the things you're considering here is making notes for yourself. What are things I can practice from this session to help myself? Like any business leader, any business owner, what am I doing to manage myself? And by doing that, hopefully then influence the people around me, my family members, also my team. So we'll go through and just have a look at, as you know, change is a process. And we go through stages of change. This is an updated version of a common grief change model that we use in psychology, but it's been aligned to the pandemic, developed through KPMG. And as you know, people have been going through a valley of despair. And I'm sure you probably have gone through this at some stage. And its ability is, what's your ability to come up the other side and explore, recognize what opportunities there are, commit to a change process and a managing process and work through that. Look at ways that how people can work productively in this situation and take pride in what you're achieving in the work you're doing and the resilience you have to do it. But that takes a bit of effort. It takes a bit of effort to come out of that valley and work through those sort of things. And it's a matter of thinking is, what are your techniques to work? And this is where we come back to being in a VUCA world. The VUCA model was originally developed by the US military as a way of managing training their captains and their leaders how to actually deal with quite volatile situations in battle. It's been picked up by Harvard and other leadership organizations now to look at training leaders in crisis management. And one of the things is to continually accept, like we have been through the pandemic, there's a lot of volatility and uncertainty. You know, decisions made a month ago are changing now. The idea of wearing masks now is something we didn't consider a month ago. So they're the sort of things based on new evidence and new research will continually change. And that's the sort of things that happens in a VUCA environment. One of the things we know is that if you continually focus on clarity, keep focusing on gathering facts that are real, not necessarily myths, and always check reality and have these conversations with other people to check your reality with others. And that way you manage perception. The issue with uncertainty is often our perception and our unconscious biases could take over. Therefore, we're not seeing the things probably with good clarity. So often having conversations where you're talking and getting clarity about the facts, what you can and can't do, reality about what you can move forward on, they're the sort of things will help with a VUCA situation. And here's 5 particular techniques that we find is really helpful for positive leadership in this type of environment. Hopefully, I'm sure you all are, is just ensure what's the different safety strategies you're putting in place, from basic hygiene with your teams to remote socialization activities, etc. What are the techniques you're encouraging yourself around keeping calm? What are the activities you're doing around that? What are the activities you're encouraging with your teams around that? Connecting with others, hopefully through some sort of MS Teams or some sort of other processes, or also just generally by phone in a traditional way, just talking to each other and checking in. Encouraging self-efficacy is checking, look, we do have the confidence and we have the ability to change, like that poll, is it shows us that you can adapt, and that's giving yourself some confidence. And the other key thing here is, particularly after this second wave coming through, can we keep our hope up? Can we keep our focus about what we can do? And we will work through this. So here's a simple exercise I've done with a few different organizations. I recently did this, one of my clients is Priceline, the Priceline pharmaceutical business here. I've been working through with their support office, just working with their management teams about what they can continually keep, stop and start doing. So the idea is to have these conversations and do them on a regular basis. Now you can do this as yourself, just think about it for yourself. If you create a plan, what do I keep doing? What do I start doing? What do I stop doing? The reason is it keeps you into that rational thinking and slows down your limbic system, slows down the emotional response, because you've got to write it out. And this is sometimes a good brainstorming exercise with your team to keep them also focused on what can be in their control. And again, because we've been going through a bit of emotional upheaval, coming out of that valley, you need a sense like I'm taking back control. So thinking about what I can do is a good technique of some sort of written or conversation exercise like this. The other thing to consider about is, what are your short-term business plans? And one of the ways to look at this is to help yourself psychologically is to focus on your values and your basic human needs. Like we highlighted it, if you look at your business plan now for the next month or so, what are the overall physiological cash flow, safety management, personal things you need to work through, overall those sort of things, and a short-term focus. And the idea is to encourage us through some sort of scenario planning. And this keeps your mind agile. okay, we tried this, what would work? We tried this. This is about myself, my own business, moving to running and setting up e-learning. You know, I experimented and explored with different options to look at what could work. And then I just showed on a certain platform, and have now been, myself and my team, been training up in how to use that. So we've adapted to that, but we took a few different conversations about what we could do and couldn't do, and what would work for us based on our values, and what would be also what is relevant to our clients as well. And so we encourage that. So again, this helps us stay with some sort of focus of purpose, and we're doing it for some reason. We're getting up in the morning to drive these sort of driven activities of values and purpose. To give an example of this, for example, EY, which is a peer in Australia and globally, they did this for their teams and for their clients. They just set up 4 key actions that all their teams needed to focus on. And this is something that's been driving their business to stay with some sort of continuity. So these are good sort of things to think about, is what are those 4 or 5 things you want people to focus on? Remember, giving people clarity and manage expectations and focus will help them work through this mentally and psychologically. Accenture, which is the client that Positivity Institute we work with, did this with their teams. They just established with their leadership group 5 key steps to reinvent themselves, to keep themselves going. As you see, people are a key part of the strategies now, focusing on people first and looking at that, because you keep people are staying resilient, they'll help you work through this change and challenge that's going with the pandemic. So it's important to keep them at the forefront of your planning. Then also it's about thinking about your work environment, your workplace. As some of you in the retail industry, you've been looking about space and opportunities about how many people can come in, all those type of things, and keep building on those ideas. Solve your problems in phases. Think about it as one step at a time approach. Because the other part you've got to consider is that it's a reality is that it's something that you've got to work through, is that the change will probably continue. This is some of the new research coming through suggesting is that a lot of people actually don't want to go back to the way things were, because now they've got used to online shopping, they're working from home, they're looking at situations where they can actually do and work productively. I don't know how many different clients I've spoken to, from council groups to state government to also private organizations, where they're saying to me is, you know, if I could continually work from home, that'd be great. And that way they're feeling like they can be more productive. Working with a franchise group here in Melbourne, and they've been also finding is that they can get better productivity out of their team from working from home. So they're still productive and active in the sense of their business. So it's a matter of thinking through, accepting that maybe things won't go back to the way they were. And therefore is, how do you start planning your business and your thinking around that, and plan for this sort of expectation? Because again, this won't be purely your choice. It'll be a social change and a community change, and something you've got to consider and map into your planning. So one way to consider that when we talk about resilience is that resilience is something that does help us manage change. And research shows it certainly is that if you're more resilient, your team's more resilient, then the chances are is that your ability to think through change and work on change plans and implement them well is far stronger, as you see from these results here. What is resilience? Something to think about is, and I often use it a bit of analogy, is that it's a bit of a raincoat. It's something that actually protects you so that you don't feel vulnerable. So particularly when going through difficult times. In recent months, I've been working with first responders, emergency services people, working through their techniques about resilience, knowing that they can't stop putting themselves on the front line, knowing that they needed to actually go out and still meet with people who could be, where they could catch the virus. We needed to help them have that psychological equivalent of a raincoat protection for themselves. And so the ability to also bounce back, as we've highlighted from that questionnaire you highlighted, resilience is the ability to adapt and bounce back when you've gone through a difficult time. The positive thing about resilience is it's quite a proactive process. It can help with your whole energy and navigate your difficult times through the adversity. It gives us that sustainability and well-being. So one of the ways that you actually keep your resilience is doing these 4 things. Look, there's plenty of other things as well, but I'm giving you these 4 things because these are 4 proven by science and research now. These 4 things we see are very effective in building people's resilience or helping people bounce back. I use this particularly when I'm dealing with people with PTSD, or certainly in the sense of also trauma situations, where we're working with them around meditation, exercise, diet, and sleep. You get these 4 things in balance, it's amazing how much more energy you have to think through problems, solve problems, and work through it. So here's another poll that just checks through for yourself. What are some of the things you're doing for self-care? So thinking through in the sense of, I'm thinking I'll just sort of check through here. So to find the end of the poll here. So I can't seem to find the other poll there. Maybe you want to put into the chat as an option there, just in the sense of what are some of the things you're doing? What are some of the things you're doing to actually look at self-manage and give yourself some energy during the day? How many of you are doing exercise, things like that? So it'd be good to sort of get your input and think about is what are some activities here that you're doing to cope with resilience? But again, have a think about this also. Are you doing this with your teams? Hopefully you're having conversations with your team about, and I've been doing this with a council here in Melbourne, working through with their team members and highlighted key things around, as part of their conversations with their teams, one of the things is check in with what's their activities they're doing to look after themselves. Yep. Yes, for lunchtime, bike rides, which is good. Ensure I exercise, yep, which is great. Regular breaks from the desk is a really good thing. Working from home and have a daily walk, which is really good to sort of see, yep. The other sort of things, hopefully think about is, yep. And if you haven't thought about these sort of things, if you've been working all day and working at nights and sort of still working through, just think about is what some things you can do to adapt to that and change that. Key thing about it is that you start to have this as part of your routine and as part of your team conversation as well. Is that you're having this activity there. This is part of your safety management. It's part of your well-being strategies to work through this. As I said, I've got a particular manager I work with in a manufacturing area, and look, his business has changed quite significantly in the sense of the amount of activities they've had to change, in the sense of the way they've set up their office operations, in the sense of personal space, in the sense of their isolation processes, and also overall in the general sense of their helping their teams cope with it being in a hotspot area. And he's been quite resilient. And he's a great role model because he's been demonstrating his team, this is the things he does. He shares with them, this is what I've been doing each morning. This is what I encourage you to have breaks and make sure you do your exercise during the breaks and things like that. So that's helped them all cope with working through the change and adapting. And again, if you're thinking about how do I manage change, one of the things is, have I got the energy to manage change? And this is where the resilience piece comes through. Keep through that. Yep. So part of that is the resilience helps us regulate our emotions. How many of you have had that situation, where you've, clearly just got quite upset and you just sort of emotions have just bursted out in an inappropriate time at a meeting, at home, in a conversation. And the other sort of things we realize is that when we're tired or when our overall stress is too high, our emotions, regulation of emotions particularly, becomes enabled. So it doesn't help us in the sense of coping things. So a couple of fair things here to think about is vent to a friend, brush it off, shake it off, those type of things. And I recently worked this with a financial advisor. He's been going through some major changes, even last year with the small business he has, with the recent Royal Commission last year, needed to change their code of conduct, needed to do some more training. So there's a lot of changes went on. And through that, but now also COVID, is working through with him and his team about emotional self-regulation techniques. So purely just activities to help them deal with the pressure of the change. So again, think about it, is what's some ways you just vent to a friend, brush it off, do some sort of shaking off activity, write it out. Fast walk, as people mentioned there, doing switch off activities. Hopefully things that you're doing to switch off. One of the things to consider is, hopefully, are you switching off from the news and taking a break from all the coronavirus conversations and talking about something else completely? Looking at it in the sense of, going on to Netflix, reading a book, following some sport if you can, in the sense of just thinking about is, what are some ways to help yourself keep your clear thinking? What we find is if you keep yourself emotional control, it helps with decision making. And this helps very much in the sense of, as you know, how important it is for business leaders to have clear decision making. Part of that can be in the sense of the way you regulate your emotions. So think about it also in the way, in sense of, you know, how you have some good news times. It's been great to see how I've been working with a few different organizations, and they've been catching up with each other on a social via Zoom. So just catching up with their teams and networks and their friends through that way. I've certainly been doing that with my team. Certainly been looking at it for even for my family, very regularly catching up and having Zoom sort of parties. I come from a family of 10, so when we get together, it's a big scene anyway. So it's a matter of thinking through is what's your different ways of keeping connected and active with people. And there's John Krasinski, some good news, there's a program that was here and around the world. And it was great just to sort of go on and actually see some positive things that people are doing to help each other. And again, hopefully you're having these conversations with your team members, even though they're going through the difficult times, engage them in conversation about what's working well. And again, this helps with a positive mindset to keep yourself focused on things that are going well, because there's lots of news will tell you things that aren't going well. And you've got to hopefully, as a leader, keep that balance of perspective of what's happening there. And that comes back to your mindset. To think through is in the sense of what's the particular mindset you have in the sense of working through a change, and which one particularly works. What we know from some of the positive psychology research is we've picked up that there's probably two common mindsets: a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. The growth mindset is you know, in traditional terms, in old days, we would have maybe called an attitude. But what we see from this and the neuroscience is it increases a certain level of networking and patterns in our brain to help us focus in a different way to a fixed mindset. So what it shows us is that in a growth mindset, we have a willingness to be learning, and we have quite a more, what we call curious part of our brain activated. So a lot more of our brain's front part of our brain is very active in a growth mindset. We're thinking about new ideas, we're exploring options, we're willing to consider how we could change. So it's a willingness to learn. A fixed mindset, what we often see is a lot of part of the brain is in that middle section, or the limbic system, where it's a bit based on a bit of fight and flight process, and we don't want to change. We'll resist the change, you know, or we'll think, oh, well, we can't do that, or we can't do this. And that's the type of conversation that goes on. There's a lot of negative conversations sort of process. And we talked about before, the ants are a common pattern that we see in a fixed mindset. And as I said before, you can go into a fixed mindset. It's not unusual. What you've got to do is helpfully develop and learn techniques to help you build a growth mindset. Your mindset has a huge influence then on how your body reacts to the change. You're thinking about building that resilience for yourself with enough energy and a growth mindset. It's a fair chance is, from what we see from the research, is you'll cope with any adversity. And particularly with the pandemic activity, is that we're seeing will continue. It helps you sustain that energy as well, and keeps you on a focus about what you can do, what's going to work for you. And the other sort of things to consider is how do you build that? Look, simple things to do or build a growth mindset is, first of all, think about is, you know, and as I've done this with my team, and I certainly encourage it with some organizations I work with, at the meetings, when you get together, talk about, you know, what's one good thing that happened yesterday? So start your conversations on a positive note. Think about is what's working well. Like I showed you before, think about is what do we need to keep doing? What do we need to continue doing? What do we need to stop doing? They're the sort of conversations that keep us having problem-solving focus, a solution focus towards looking at ways we can solve our problems. And that puts us in a growth mindset. Think about is what are the things that you and your team have been learning over the last few months, and what plans you're putting in for further learning. The opportunity to continually keep your people learning through this change process will keep their mind agile and open to adapt. When we put ourselves into a learning mindset, our mind opens up to new ideas and thinking and has less resistance to change. So again, think about is what's the last thing you've learned? I'm sure, you know, some of you have probably had to learn MS Teams or practice on Zoom, or learn different ways of maybe in retail and hospitality, how to convert your facilities, your restaurants and activities into delivery online. So they're things that you learned, and that's great. And they're the sort of things to keep in mind. What are ways you're going to keep doing that? Particularly if you see this is probably going to be a long haul event. You know, we maybe, from what I saw from some of the news last night and some of the research, one of my clients is CSIRO, been working with them in the background and looking at, you know, probably looking at still to the middle of next year before probably a vaccine. And so we've got to consider is how do we help businesses cope for that long term? And so the idea is what's the things you're going to keep improving or fixing as you go along? And as I said before, we just saw from the Accenture work, keep it on short-term phase solutions. think about is what's some quick wins you can make over the period of time. And this comes back to, you know, and I'm not saying anything that probably other business leaders have mentioned to you. Is, you know, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. And this is that mindset. And all I'm highlighting to you is from the neuroscience and the positive psychology. We've called it a growth mindset. The idea is to think about how do you keep growing and improving yourself, and therefore the team and your business as well. And this is a good attitude to have in a difficult situation, to think through it. Because what we know from that is it triggers more performance thinking, operating to willingly look at solving problems. And as a leader, hopefully you think about is the key things your teams and your business is looking for. Are you good at planning? Are you good at solving problems? Are you good at decision making? Are you good at working through complexity? To do that, you've got to have a mindset that's willing to work through problems. You've got to be rational rather than highly emotional. You've got to have the energy to stay focused over a period of time. To do that, you've got to have enough physical fitness. You've got to have enough ability to calm your mind and cope with those sort of changes. So they're the sort of things to consider is, do you have all those sort of parts of a leader? And think about is what you need to do if you need to build on those. And I work with senior executives and CEOs who continually check in with me and say, Paul had a pretty bad week. And I just help them work through again to reframe and reset themselves and help them work through strategies just to get themselves that little boost. A bit like you're having a personal trainer, you know, somebody you need to have as an external motivational strategy. And the key thing is it just resets yourself that it is okay to seek for support. And if you need support, and that's why I think, you know, what your Ballarat Commerce Group is doing is great, is that you've got a network of yourselves to think about is how do I stay connected and supportive of each other and working together on changes that we can actually make effective for our community in Ballarat. So thinking through this, think about it in the sense of, am I able to do these 7 things? I've got the 5 key things of leadership. Am I ensuring safety? Am I keeping calm? And what are my strategies to keep calm? And hopefully we've highlighted there that self-regulation, the emotional regulation will work well. What's the ways I'm connecting with others? How am I encouraging that self-efficacy? And this is where the learning, the idea of continually learning and improving yourself and talking about solving problems and thinking about how do I encourage hope in a conversation that I'm having with myself and my team, and think about it in the sense of ways I'm thinking forward and thinking, okay, how do we continually move through these situations? And as I said, ways to do that is focus on what's important to you, your values and your basic human needs. Keep focus on getting facts and prioritizing your actions and your plans based on those facts. Manage expectations for yourself and your clients and continually think about ways you're doing those sort of things. Keep your focus on what you can do rather than what you can't do. If you're starting to hear and sense the ants coming in your head, start to think about is, okay, write them out and then vent them with your friend, but then focus on, okay, what's the best way for me to think? How can I make things work for myself? And again, that may be helpful by writing it out. What are you going to do? I find it works for me in the morning is to set a bit of a goal for myself. Okay, this is what I need to do for today. And just keep that focus. And that helps my subconscious stay attentive to the task I've got at hand. So set new performance measures for yourself. Think about it as the ways you're actually going to look at short-term business plans, the way you're going to focus on your, identifying the basic needs that you're going to need to keep going. Talk about those mindfulness, meditation, exercise, your diet and your sleep. They're really important to sort of think about in the sense of those sort of things. And then next week's session, when we talk about more positive strategies, I'll add a bit more to those techniques about the meds, which will help build up, particularly if it's around positive strategies to help with sort of your exercise and your mindfulness and your sleep patterns. And the idea is to self-regulate. Great to see that some of you highlighted, you know, going away and going for a walk and exercise, sometimes a great way to just to clear your mind. One of the things we know is with high stress is that it means that high level of cortisol, which is a chemical that goes in our body to keep ourselves highly alert, it becomes quite active. The thing is exercise and sleep are the only 2 key things that help burn and clear out that cortisol. So you need to be able to do a lot more exercise and activities there. And also then the sort of the idea of a mindfulness or sleep actually helps with that. So build time and resilience. And this is why it's encouraging is hopefully you schedule in, okay, when are my times to be resilient? And I did this here with certainly a leader here, and it was in the franchise business, in the home building business. and with their CEO looking at ways that they schedule their time. I'm going to do this morning to help myself. So it was a bit of exercise. The next thing was looking at breaks for lunch and look at the diet he was eating. Then it was looking at a sense of time with the family activities there. So it's something to consider. What are your different ways of scheduling this into your daily life and your weekly work activities? And then also have a consideration, what are you doing with your teams around resilience? So where's the conversations you're having, the sessions you're doing with them about how they're coping and strategies to cope with that. Check with them about, are they doing exercise? How's their sleep? What's their activities? Not saying that you have to solve it for them, but just raising it up as a conversation gets them to realize is that you're interested, but also that helps them think, oh, I need to do something about that. You're right. And get them to think about how they're going to help themselves. And that's something to consider as an important strategy to work through. So happy to take any questions. If you've got any questions you want to put or anything you want to add in the chat, hopefully this gave you a few pragmatic, simple techniques you can work through and hopefully emphasize how important it is to be positive and resilient as a leader and what you need to do to think about it to cope with the longer term challenge we have with the pandemic. So are there any questions, any sort of points you want to raise, any suggestions? Looks like we're all good. Well, I hope that's been helpful for you. Hopefully that's given you some thoughts that hopefully confirmed some of the things you're doing already and giving you a bit more confidence while I'm on the right track. And hopefully it's giving you a few more tips or reaffirm, okay, yep, you're right, I've got to do this. I need to start planning this more in my plan, or to the conversations you're going to have with your family or your team members. And feel free if there's any sort of things you want to follow up with, certainly in the sense of Jody and Zoe at the Ballarat Commerce have our contact details if you need some further support. I also know you have some really good support networks in Ballarat in the sense of psychologists and health services activities there. And if you do need help, you know, it's so important to reach out and seek that, particularly in this time. As I said to you, you know, I work with a number of executives and, you know, and who accept, you know, part of their job is being, when they're on their own a lot, is to seek out some further support externally to just help them reset, recharge, rebuild their thinking so that they're always going to be on top of the game. So hopefully that was helpful. I see there's the questions there. I have some concerns with the short-term research would indicate people would want to work from home for the long term. Yeah, look, it's a good point. It is only early short-term in the sense of some of the polls, but it's something we may have to prepare for. And so, as I said, it may be worth just doing some scenarios in your business is if some of the social and consumer behavior continues. Like, for example, we already saw trends. I've been working with retail for a few years. We're already seeing trends moving towards online, but the escalation of COVID has probably elevated the activity online. So you may have to ask the question, well, what would bring people back into the brick and mortar retail? And so you have to think about is what's my strategies around if people's consumer behavior and thinking is that they're going to keep some sort of social distance, that they're going to do that. I'll give you a couple of examples of that. In Asia, for example, in Korea, in Taiwan and other countries, they've been through similar pandemics before with SARS. And so what's happened is it's quite common for them to wear masks, even when there's not a pandemic. It's quite common for them to keep social distancing. They don't shake hands. And this is a cultural thing that's been going on for quite a while because they've been through many of these experiences before. And so it has changed their social culture and behavior. And something to consider is think about it. That could be something that may happen in Australia. I don't know for sure, but this is where you need to think through your scenarios. What's my different models that I'm going to work with? And how do I prepare for that? This means keeping you agile, your willingness to adapt and change, and that keeps your thinking more resilient. So again, you know, but feel free if you want to reach out and want to have further conversations around that, about your plans and how it can work. And look, all the best. I just, you know, hope all of you stay safe and stay resilient, and look forward to, you know, have a continually positive and effective life. Take care. Bye for now.